On a cold Tuesday morning in March of 1963, a 20-year-old woman named Margaret Holloway walked into Patterson's truck and equipment in Russell County, Kansas, and asked to see their used trucks. Tom Patterson looked up from his desk, looked her over once, and laughed. Not a quiet laugh, the kind that carries across a showroom floor and makes everyone turn around to see who's being humiliated. Tom was wearing a bright red polo shirt with the dealership logo embroidered on the chest. 46 years old, clean hands, pressed khakis. He'd been selling trucks and farm equipment in Russell County since 1952. Margaret was 5'4", wearing her father's work jacket 2 sizes too big, had dirt under her fingernails, and hadn't slept in 3 days. Her father, Frank Holloway, had collapsed in the barn the previous Friday morning. Massive stroke, dead before the ambulance reached town. He was 51 years old. Frank had run a small hauling business in Russell County for 26 years. One truck, local routes, grain and livestock mostly. He'd raised Margaret alone after her mother died in 1951, taught her to drive a truck at 12, taught her to fix an engine at 14. Now Frank was gone, and Margaret had a hauling business with no truck. Frank's only truck, a 1951 Chevrolet stake bed, had thrown its transmission 2 months before he died. So Margaret walked into Patterson's, the only truck dealer within 30 miles, looking for something she could afford. "Can I help you, sweetheart?" Tom said, still smiling from his laugh. "I need a truck, something I can run a hauling business with. What do you have used?" Tom leaned back in his chair. "I heard about your daddy. Sorry for your loss. Frank was a good customer." "Thank you. So what are you planning to do with the business?" "Run it." Tom's smile got wider. "Run it by yourself." "Yes, sir." "Sweetheart, you're 20 years old. You can't run a hauling business alone. That's a man's operation. Why don't you sell the business to one of the established haulers, or better yet, sell everything? Get yourself a nice little job in town. You're a pretty girl. You'll find a husband. Let him worry about business." Margaret looked at Tom Patterson, at his clean hands, at his bright red shirt, at his confident smile. "Mr. Patterson," Margaret said quietly, "do you have a used truck for sale or not?" Tom sighed. "I've got a 1958 International Harvester stake bed, $8,500. I can finance it for you. 10% down, 7 years at 9% interest. Your payment would be about $120 a month." Margaret did the math. Over 7 years, she'd pay close to $10,100 for an $8,500 truck, nearly $1,600 in interest alone. "That's more than I can spend." "That's what equipment costs, sweetheart. Business isn't cheap." Tom shook his head. "Margaret, listen to me. I knew your daddy. He was a good man, but he was stubborn. Ran his business with old equipment, never upgraded. He left you a customer list and a broken truck. That's not a legacy. That's a burden. The smartest thing you can do is sell that business and start a life for yourself." Margaret stepped back. "My father taught me that the people who tell you what you can't do are usually the ones who are afraid you'll prove them wrong." She walked out of the dealership. Behind her, she heard Tom say something to his mechanic. She caught 2 words: "little girl." 2 weeks later, Margaret heard about an equipment auction 40 miles east in Ellsworth County. Old trucks, estate sale. She drove out on a Saturday morning with $900 in cash, everything she had. The auction was small, maybe 30 people. 2 trucks were listed: a 1949 Dodge stake bed and a 1952 International flatbed, both faded, both showing their age, both overlooked by everyone there. The 1949 Dodge went first. The auctioneer asked for $600, got silence, asked for $400. Margaret raised her hand. $350. Sold, $350. The The 1952 International went next. Margaret bid $540. A man in the back bid $560. Margaret bid $580. Sold $580. $930 for 2 trucks. She was $30 over budget. An older man walked up to her after the sale. His name was Carl Weber. He ran a small grain hauling operation. "Those are solid trucks, young lady," Carl said, "if you know how to work on them. I rebuilt my father's transmission twice before I was 18. Carl looked at her differently than Tom Patterson had, with recognition, the way one operator looks at another. "Your father taught you well." "He did." "Then you'll be just fine." Margaret borrowed a tow bar and brought both trucks home. The Dodge needed a fuel pump and brake work. The International needed electrical repairs and new tires. She spent 3 weeks in her father's workshop. By mid-April, both trucks were running. Let me tell you about Margaret's first year. She took over her father's hauling routes, grain from farms to the elevator, livestock to the sale barn, equipment between dealers. She did everything herself. Up before dawn, working until she couldn't see. The other haulers watched, talked, shook their heads. That Holloway girl is going to kill herself trying to run routes alone. She'll be done by fall, guaranteed. Tom Patterson heard the talk. He drove out to her place in June, found Margaret under the International, replacing an oil pan gasket. "Margaret, I'm not here to sell you anything. I'm here as a friend of your father's." Margaret slid out from under the truck, grease on her face, wrench in her hand. "What do you need, Mr. Patterson?" "I just want to make sure you're okay. People are worried about you." "People are talking about me. There's a difference." Tom looked at the 2 old trucks. "Those old trucks aren't going to last, Margaret. They're 15 and 12 years old. Parts are getting hard to find. You're going to have breakdowns at the worst possible times. And when that happens, you're going to lose your customers." "They'll last. I know how to take care of them." "Your daddy thought the same thing, and his truck threw a transmission. That one landed, but Margaret didn't flinch. My father's truck had over 200,000 miles on it. These have half that. I'll take my chances." Tom shook his head. "I hope you know what you're doing." "I do." That first year was brutal. Margaret ran routes 6 days a week. She underbid the established haulers because she had lower overhead. She showed up on time. She didn't damage loads. By the end of 1963, she'd grossed $11,400. After expenses, she had $2,800 left. She put every penny in the bank. But let me tell you about November of that year. The harvest rush was over. The routes slowed down. Margaret was alone in that house for the first time since her father died. She sat at the kitchen table one evening with her bank statement. $2,800. That was everything. One bad breakdown, one lost customer, and she was finished. For the first time since she'd bought those 2 trucks. She thought about Tom Patterson's words. The next morning, Margaret drove into Russell. She parked across the street from Patterson's, sat in her truck with the engine running. She watched men walk in and walk out, operators with clean boots, men who belonged in that building. She thought about how easy it would be, walk in, tell Tom she'd changed her mind. Her hand was on the door handle when she saw her reflection in the side mirror. Her father's jacket, her father's hands, dirt under the nails, calluses on the palms. She thought about her father driving those routes through 30 Kansas summers without complaint. Margaret took her hand off the door handle, put the truck in gear, drove home. She never told anyone about that morning, not for 45 years. "Everyone thinks I never doubted myself," she told me once. "That's not true. I doubted myself every single day for the first 5 years. The difference between quitting and not quitting isn't confidence. It's just deciding to go home and do the work anyway." In December of 1963, Margaret cleaned out her father's workshop. In the bottom drawer of his workbench, underneath old root sheets, she found a leather-bound ledger. It wasn't a diary, it was a business record. Frank Holloway had been documenting his operation for 23 years. Every route, every customer, every observation. He'd recorded fuel costs per mile, maintenance schedules, customer payment patterns. He'd sketched diagrams showing the most efficient route sequences. He'd calculated exactly how much it cost to run each truck per mile, down to the penny. Frank had been optimizing his business deliberately, methodically, over 2 decades. While other haulers were guessing at costs and hopping for profit, Frank had been measuring everything. There was a note on the last page. "Maggie, if you're reading this, I hope you keep the business. The routes are better than they look. I've been building them for you. Don't let anyone tell you it's just hauling. It's 23 years of relationships and it's ready. Trust the customers. They won't let you down." Margaret sat on the workshop floor and cried for an hour. Then she dried her face, put the ledger on the kitchen table, and started studying. Let me tell you about the next 17 years. Margaret ran that hauling business from 1963 to 1980 with the same 2 trucks she'd bought at auction. She followed her father's methods. She tracked every cost. She maintained relationships with every customer. She lived below her means, saved aggressively, and never took on debt. By the early 1970s, Margaret's business was consistently more profitable than operations twice her size. Her trucks ran longer between breakdowns. Her customers stayed loyal. In the drought of 1974, when half the county's haulers went under, Margaret's diversified customer base kept her working. People started noticing. How was the Holloway girl outperforming operations with newer trucks and bigger crews? The answer was in the ledger, but nobody asked Margaret. Tom Patterson was doing well through the 1970s. He sold new trucks as fast as they came off the lot. Haulers were buying bigger rigs, taking on bigger loans, expanding. He stopped by Margaret's place once a year, always the same conversation. "Still running those old trucks?" "Still running them." "How?" "Because I take care of them, same way I take care of my customers." By 1980, Margaret had $78,000 in the bank, 17 years of careful saving, no debt. Her competitors, meanwhile, were leveraged to the sky. New trucks financed at 12%, operating loans stacked on equipment loans. Everyone was confident, everyone was expanding. Then 1981 arrived. Interest rates spiked to 21%, fuel costs doubled, shipping rates collapsed. Russell County was devastated. Between 1982 and 1987, 31 hauling businesses in the county went under. Tom Patterson's dealership was bleeding. He'd financed millions in equipment during the boom. Now those loans were going bad. Margaret watched her competitors fall, one by one. Each time a business went to auction, Margaret showed up. In 1983, she bought Harold Brewer's customer contracts and 2 trucks at auction, $22,000 cash. In 1985, she bought Gene Whitfield's route list and 1 international flatbed, $18,000 cash. In 1987, she bought another operations equipment and contracts, $31,000 cash. By 1988, Margaret Holloway owned the largest independent hauling operation in Russell County. She was 45 years old. Let me tell you about the conversation that changed everything. It was a Thursday evening in October of 1986. Tom Patterson's dealership had closed that morning, 34 years of business, finished. That evening, Margaret was in her workshop when she heard a vehicle pull into the yard. Tom Patterson sat in his pickup, engine still running, staring at nothing. Margaret walked out. "Tom." "Silence." "Tom, are you all right?" He turned, his eyes were red. I closed the dealership today. I heard I'm sorry. Tom laughed, a short, broken sound. You're sorry. I told you to sell your business, told you to find a husband, called you little girl. And you're sorry. I am, because losing something you built is painful, no matter who you are. Tom was quiet. Then, how many trucks do you own now? 12. He shook his head. I pushed debt on every hauler in this county for 20 years, made good money doing it, and now most of them are gone, because of loans I helped them take out. He looked at her, and I laughed at the one person who was actually doing it right. You, the little girl with 2 junk trucks, you were right about everything, and I was wrong about everything. I wasn't right about everything. I was just careful. My father taught me that the only person who can take your business from you is the bank, so don't give the bank that power. Tom started his truck. Margaret, I owe you an apology, a real one, for every time I tried to convince you that you were doing it wrong. You were doing it right. Thank you, Tom. And those trucks, the ones you bought for $900, are they still running? Every single day. Tom shook his head. $900 for 2 trucks, best investment anyone in this county ever made. He drove away. Margaret stood in the yard. She didn't feel victory. She felt sadness. Because Tom Patterson wasn't a bad man. He was a man who believed what the industry told him, and the industry was wrong. Margaret ran that hauling business until 2008, 45 years. She expanded to 18 trucks, always buying at auctions, always paying cash. The 1949 Dodge ran until 1989, 38 years of service. It sits in her barn today. The 1952 International ran until 2001, 49 years. Her father's ledger became her Bible. When Margaret retired in 2008, she sold her business to a young couple. She gave them fair terms, and one piece of advice. Take care of the trucks. The trucks will take care of everything else. She also gave them the ledger. Margaret Holloway is 81 years old now. She lives in the same house her father built. She reads his ledger sometimes, late in the evening. She runs her fingers over his handwriting and thinks about what he gave her. Not just the business, not just the knowledge, but the belief that a 20-year-old woman with 2 junk trucks and $900 could build something that would last. The dealer in the bright red shirt told her to sell the business and find a husband. 20 years later, she owned more trucks than anyone in the county, and the dealer's business was gone. My father spent 23 years building that business, Margaret says. He put in more than he took out every single year. When the crisis came and everyone else was leveraged to death, I had cash. That's not luck. That's just math. You get back what you put in. She pauses. Same thing's true of people. Same thing's true of everything. The dealer in the bright red shirt laughed at junk trucks. The junk trucks carried a business for 49 years. And the woman who believed in them became exactly what her father hoped she'd be. Careful, patient, proven right.